Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I'm going to see if I can get through this video without being continually dive bombed by bumblebees. But I'm in the backyard of my Portland, Oregon permaculture garden. We're in zone 9A and it is a beautiful day in August. It has been rainy the last few days. Normally August is a very, very dry month here, but the rain has returned early. And that means it feels like there's an acceleration of the seasons, right? It feels like we are rapidly tipping into autumn. I know we're supposed to have hot weather the end of this week again, but it's been cold at night. I had to sleep in wool socks last night. And it really feels like that transition time in the garden is upon us. And I have noticed that the pollinators the last couple of days are behaving similarly. So I wanted to talk about, in particular, one plant in my garden here. I think there's a bee in the back of my head. Hang on a second. I noticed that there is an earnestness to the pollinators. When there are breaks in the rain, they are out en masse trying to get as much pollen and nectar out of plants as they can. And it's not just the honeybees, not just my honeybees, but all of the native bees as well. There have been a ton of longhorn bees on my asters and, and bumblebees on everything, and all kinds of little native bees whose genus and species I can't readily identify by sight, and I have to go look them up because I don't know as much about native bees as I would like to. I can probably identify 7, 8, 9 species off the top of my head. So the plant behind me that I want to talk about today is Leonoris cardiaca, also known as motherwort. I am standing in a part of the garden where I have blueberries and Good King Henry growing below me, and behind me on the other side of this camera is my rain garden, which is just full of late bloomers as well. So I'm in very close proximity to all kinds of bees. In front of these very large annual plants here, look, are probably 8 or 9 feet tall. And then behind me in the rain garden, you can see an abundance here in the rain garden as well of all kinds of late blooming plants. Right behind the camera is a bergamot that's covered in bees as well. So I'm in close proximity to all of these pollinators that are all capable of envenomating me. The bumblebees can multiple times because they do not have a barbed stinger. Bumblebees can sting you over and over just like wasps can, but I'm not actually concerned at all. It's been a long time since I've been stung in the garden. Twice I've been stung by bumblebees. Once when I was doing some weeding in the garden and I reached out and, oh, hello. Once when I reached out and accidentally grabbed one that was in a flower, and once when I had one land in my elbow pit and I didn't see her and I lifted my arm up and pinched her. So both those times were my fault. And she was just defending herself in both those instances. I've been stung by honeybees a lot because I'm a beekeeper, but not generally out in the garden. I cannot think of a single instance where I have been doing my own thing in the garden versus being in my bee colonies where I have been stung. My kids have been stung walking barefoot in the garden when they were littler. I think all of my children have at least once because they didn't wear shoes very much when they were little, and I have a lot of low growing flowering plants, especially white clover, and then stepping on a honeybee can be a risk. Okay, so getting back to this plant behind, no, I'm not afraid of standing next to all these bees. They're minding their business and I'm minding mine. I am not bothering these ladies. And they are focused on collecting food, right? So a lot of times I think when folks are out in their gardens, especially late in the season when bees can seem a little bit more frantic, folks can be really intimidated. And just know, these gals out here, they're not defending a colony. They don't have a honey store to defend. They are just focused on getting food and bringing it back home. So when we're looking to plant late season food for our bees, I really like this plant, Leonoris cardiaca. I planted it, a gajillion years ago, and it is a vigorous self-sowing annual. You can see it's very, very tall, really interesting structure to the plant. It is spiky. There aren't thorns on it, but around the flowers, it's like bristly and it's uncomfortable. I don't like grabbing it. So just be aware of that and Be aware of the fact that it self-sows vigorously. So if you don't want to have it come up everywhere, you want to make sure that you cut it to the ground before it sets seed. I cut it back and then I kind of sprinkle the seeds where I want them. I still end up getting volunteers all kinds of places I hadn't planned on, including this patch here, because the place I originally planted my Leonoris was way over in the side yard, and it has kind of migrated down through the garden over the years, and that's okay. I just pull it up where it comes up where I don't want it. But I love this plant because it provides late bee food. It flowers for a long time, and because so many native bees really love it. Now, I got this from Strictly Medicinal Seed. They have multiple types of motherwort. But this plant provides a really structural, beautiful element in the garden. It provides bee food, and it is medicinal. I don't use it for its medicinal purposes, but that is an additional yield that you get out of the plant. However, again, I want to encourage planting it with caution. Look at what you're getting into before you put a plant in the garden, because, you know, robust, vigorous, self-sower, all of those can kind of be keywords for, like, this plant can get aggressive and it requires maintenance. It may come up where you don't want it. And also, it is a large plant and it tends to do this. You notice that some of the stalks are basically like horizontal right in my pathway. So it's supposed to be very, very upright, but inevitably it ends up being wider than I expect because some of the stems do flop over. This here behind me is not one plant. You're looking at maybe a dozen plants altogether that form this clump. So when we're planning for our permaculture gardens, we don't want to just plan for food out here. My grapes, mulberry, annual veggies. We don't want to just plan for food crops. We want to also really be inclusive and mindful of our pollinators and giving our pollinators as much of a long season of food as we possibly can. The same way I'm looking to stretch my fruit harvest by growing fruits that mature as early as late April and early May, all the way in through late October. I want to be conscious that I am choosing flowering plants that have that same kind of progression and long season so that I can have things that bloom early and provide really early food like rosemary and crocus that are blooming in February here in Oregon, all the way into Leonoris, which is going to keep blooming well through all through September. And then I have some plants that bloom into October, like my Michaelmas daisies. I keep making faces because I keep getting bumped and buzzed. So recommending with caution Leonoris cardiaca. I love it in my garden. There are lots of people for whom this plant may not be a great late pollinator food, but you can find something that is. There's got to be something, hopefully a diversity of some things that will work well in your climate zone, that will work well within the context of your garden, so that you're creating habitat and forage and a source of enjoyment for you. Like, I love being out in the garden and observing all of the bees. Oh, also I should say hummingbirds will visit this plant as well. It's not just bees. And hoverflies, it's also hummingbirds. Just being aware that when we're planning our gardens, we're not only planning for ourselves, we're planning for wildlife. We're planning to have the pollinators feel welcome and fed and cared for all year long, because we want them to pollinate our crops, but we want them to keep coming back and know that our yards are great places to be, are great habitat, and provide consistent sources of food throughout the year. So if you don't grow motherwort and you do intentionally plan for those late season crops, like maybe I'm looking at this plant, maybe it is some bergamot that you have in your garden. Maybe it is late echinacea. Maybe it's those Michaelmas daisies. Maybe it's something else that's native where you are. If you could share that in the comments, that would be awesome. I'm always looking for season extenders for my pollinators. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to click like and subscribe, and also check out the other ways you can support my channel down below. And I'll be back really soon. I am editing footage from our trip to the PSU Farmers Market, and I have a couple other gardening videos coming out. And also I have have noticed that my elderberries on the far side, I'm pointing over to my shade garden, are ripening early this year, and I want to be sure and cover that as well. For now, I'm going to go pick blueberries, and I'll be back real soon. Bye-bye.